My name is Chris Herman. I'm an assistant professor at Baylor College of Medicine in the Department of Molecular Virology and Microbiology. I also teach science at a private middle school in Houston, Texas. The topic of this presentation is infectious diseases. A disease is a pathological condition that is characterized by an identifiable group of signs and symptoms. Disease occurs when the cells or molecules of an organism cannot function properly. Human disease can be caused by infectious agents, genetic defects, or environmental factors. Here we will focus only on infectious diseases, that is, diseases caused by infectious agents such as bacteria, viruses, and other agents that can be passed from one person to another. When an infectious agent enters the body and begins to reproduce, an infection occurs. The infectious agent that causes disease is called a pathogen, and the organism that is invaded by an infectious agent is called the host. The ability of different pathogens to cause disease in a host varies. Agents that cause rapid and severe disease are said to be virulent. Infectious diseases are a leading cause of death worldwide. They are responsible for a quarter to a third of all deaths and account for more than half of deaths in children under the age of 5. Of the top 10 causes of death compiled by the World Health Organization, 5 are due to infectious diseases. The top single-agent killers are HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. Other leading causes of death due to infectious agents are lower respiratory infections and diarrheal diseases, both of which can be caused by a variety of agents. In the United States alone, it has been estimated that the annual cost of medical care for treating infectious diseases is about $120 billion. Humans have probably been plagued by infectious diseases throughout history. Ancient writings contain descriptions of diseases that can be recognized as smallpox, polio, and malaria. Throughout the centuries, infectious diseases have caused significant numbers of human deaths. Smallpox is thought to have been responsible for more deaths than all other infectious diseases, but fortunately, this disease has now been eradicated. The large scope of human death due to infectious diseases, such as the bubonic plague and the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, is even thought to have influenced the course of history. Today, improved sanitation and the development of vaccines and antibiotics have saved many lives. But in spite of these advances, millions continue to die from infectious diseases, such as AIDS, malaria, and the measles, especially in the developing world. Although bacteria had been discovered in 1675, it wasn't until 1876 that a German physician, Robert Koch, demonstrated that a specific disease is caused by a particular microorganism. Working with the bacterium that causes anthrax, he showed that the disease was caused by a particular bacterium named Bacillus anthracis, and further showed that tuberculosis was caused by a distinct bacterium named Mycobacterium tuberculosis. He developed 4 criteria, still used today, to demonstrate that a specific disease is caused by a particular agent. First, the agent must be associated with every case of the disease. The agent must be isolated from a disease host and grown in culture. And when the culture-grown agent is introduced into a healthy, susceptible host, the agent must cause the same disease. Finally, the same agent must again be isolated from the infected experimental host. Most disease-causing organisms or pathogens are microscopic in size. Because of their small size, they are referred to as microbes or microorganisms. The study of these organisms is called microbiology, and the scientists who study them are called microbiologists. Not all microbes cause disease, however, and many, such as bacteria living in our digestive tracts, are beneficial and even essential to us. There are different groups of microbes or infectious agents that cause disease. They are bacteria, which cause diseases such as strep throat, pneumonia, and tuberculosis; viruses, which cause the flu, AIDS, chickenpox, and other diseases; protozoa, a member of this group, causes malaria; fungi, which cause sinusitis and skin diseases; and helminths, a group that includes parasitic worms. There are many ways that infectious diseases can spread. A particular pathogen usually has a specific way in which it is transmitted that is related to the type of cell or tissue that the agent targets. For example, cold viruses infect the respiratory tract and are dispersed through coughing and sneezing, Once in the air, the virus particles can then infect the respiratory tract of another person when inhaled. Ways in which infectious agents can be transmitted are through the air, through contaminated food or water, through body fluids, by direct contact with contaminated objects, and by animal vectors such as insects, birds, and bats. Once a person becomes infected, there's usually a standard course or phases that the disease runs through. For each disease, the phases are characterized by certain signs, things that can be observed by examining a patient, such as fever, coughing, vomiting, or rashes. Disease phases are also characterized by different symptoms, which are things a patient may feel, such as pain or nausea. The time between when a person first becomes infected with an agent and the appearance of signs and symptoms is known as the incubation period. During this period of time, which varies between different agents, a person will be unaware that they are infected, but they may already be contagious. In the next phase, called the prodromal phase, a patient will experience mild, nonspecific symptoms that signal onset of some diseases. It is during the clinical phase that a person experiences the typical signs and symptoms of disease. This is when the symptoms are most intense and the body's immune system is actively working to destroy invading pathogen. Once the number of infectious agents begins to drop and the symptoms have begun to subside, the patient has entered the decline phase, in which the body's activities gradually return to normal. The last phase of an infectious disease is the recovery phase. At this point, symptoms have disappeared, tissues are healing, and the body is regaining strength. Infectious diseases are classified in different ways: by how quickly they run their course, by how widespread their localization is in the body, and by the order in which they infect individuals. The duration of infectious diseases varies. Some run their course quickly, others may persist for a long period of time. Acute diseases develop and run their course quickly. An example of an acute infection is the common cold. Chronic diseases develop more slowly and are usually less severe, but may persist for a long period of time. Tuberculosis is an example of a chronic disease. Latent infections are characterized by periods of no symptoms between outbreaks of illness. An example of this type of infection is cold sores, caused by herpes virus, that can recur after many years. Local infections are confined to a specific area of the body. When pathogens spread from a localized site into the bloodstream, a systemic infection can occur. A systemic infection is a generalized illness that infects most of the body. On occasion, a person can become infected by more than one agent. The primary or initial infection occurs in a previously healthy person and is usually an acute infection. But because of this infection, the patient's immune system may become weakened, and the person may become infected by another agent in what's referred to as a secondary infection. There are several ways that infectious agents cause disease in the infected host. Some microbes, especially bacteria, produce poisons, such as toxins and enzymes that destroy cells and tissues. Other microbes, such as viruses, directly invade and destroy host cells. But many of the signs and symptoms of disease, such as sneezing and vomiting, are actually triggered by the response of your immune system in an attempt to rid your body of the invading pathogen. Now let's take a closer look at a couple of specific infectious diseases, the flu and HIV. Influenza, or simply the flu, is an acute disease that is caused by the influenza virus and is transmitted through the air. The influenza virus infects the respiratory tract, but as anyone who's ever had the flu knows, symptoms are felt throughout the body and include fever, aches, and weakness. Recovery usually occurs within a week. Influenza epidemics occur annually, but for most healthy individuals, these seasonal flu epidemics are not life-threatening. However, several times each century, more widespread and deadly pandemics occur. The influenza pandemic of 1918 is estimated to have killed about 50 million people worldwide. Pandemics occur when a new strain of the influenza virus arises that is significantly different from currently circulating strains, so that our immune system cannot mount an effective response against them. There is concern right now that the strain of avian flu, known as H5N1, that has killed large numbers of birds, mostly in Asia, could lead to the next pandemic. So far, there have only been a couple hundred human H5N1 infections that were mostly acquired through direct contact with sick birds. What scientists worry about is that this strain of the virus could mutate in such a way that would allow it to spread easily from person to person. Influenza virus is one of the most changeable viruses known. From year to year, the virus undergoes smaller changes to its genetic code. This is the reason why flu shots must be given annually. But occasionally, more significant changes occur. These can lead to the more deadly pandemics. Because influenza virus can also infect other species, such as pigs and birds, one way that a new strain can be introduced into the human population is when a human influenza virus strain mixes pieces of its genetic material with a strain from a bird, forming a new hybrid virus that cannot be recognized effectively by our immune systems. Unfortunately, scientists cannot predict when the next pandemic will occur, but they are working on potential vaccines and drugs that could limit the spread of the virus. The most devastating infectious disease of our time is AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome. This disease is caused by the virus called HIV, which stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. In 2006, approximately 40 million people were living with HIV, and about 3 million people died of AIDS. HIV attacks cells of the immune system, primarily cells known as CD4+ cells. HIV destroys the ability of these cells to fight infection by other pathogens. So AIDS patients can die from infectious agents that are not normally harmful to healthy individuals. HIV is not easily spread from person to person because transmission of HIV requires direct contact with body fluids of an infected person and is spread through blood and semen. There's usually a long lag period from the time someone is infected with HIV until the person begins to experience the symptoms of AIDS. An individual may experience flu-like symptoms soon after infection, but then remain asymptomatic for up to a decade. However, even though the patient may not experience any symptoms, the virus is replicating inside the body and the infected person is contagious. There are currently several classes of anti-HIV drugs that prolong the length and quality of life of HIV-infected people. The drugs work by blocking important steps in the virus's reproductive cycle. Combinations of these drugs are effective for many people, at least for a period of time, but they can produce unpleasant side effects, and the drugs are not accessible in many parts of the world. Although these drugs can prolong life, it is important to remember that these drugs are not a cure for AIDS and will not rid the body of the virus. Ideally, we would like to have a vaccine to prevent or treat AIDS, but currently none is available, although work is ongoing to develop one. Vaccines are the most effective way to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. Vaccines have eliminated smallpox and greatly reduced the incidence of many childhood illnesses, at least in the developed world. Vaccines consist of either weakened or killed microbes, or even just components of a pathogen. Vaccines work by stimulating the body's immune system to fight off infections. Antimicrobial drugs, such as antibiotics, have saved many lives. However, antibiotics work only for some bacterial infections. They're completely ineffective for viral infections or infections caused by other types of agents. An increasing concern for medical professionals is that bacteria are gradually becoming more resistant to the current classes of antibiotics that are available. A limited number of drugs exist and are effective against some viral and fungal diseases, but overall there are few drugs available to treat these types of infections. Relatively simple methods such as frequent and thorough hand washing are important in limiting the spread of infectious diseases. Protection against mosquitoes is especially important in the developing world to protect against malaria, and closer to home from other infectious diseases such as the West Nile virus. In outbreaks of severe disease, quarantine is used to limit the spread of the disease and would probably be used in the event of a flu pandemic. Although we have learned how to control many infectious diseases, new diseases and outbreaks of old diseases continue to arise and spread. These are referred to as emerging diseases. Emerging diseases are those that have recently appeared within a population or whose incidence or geographic range is rapidly expanding. When the emergence of a disease is due to a new agent, it is referred to as an emerging disease. And when the emergence is due to a disease whose incidence had declined in the past, but has again reappeared, it is called a re-emerging disease. There are several reasons why a disease can emerge or re-emerge. Some of the reasons are due to natural processes, such as the evolution of an infectious agent over time, but some result from human activities. As the population grows, increased population densities and increased travel make it easier for an agent to spread from person to person. And as humans move into new geographic areas, closer contact with animal species increases the likelihood that an agent that infects animals can make the jump into humans. In some cases, as in the case of tuberculosis, diseases that were previously under control can make a comeback, particularly when the agent becomes resistant to currently used antimicrobial drugs. One of the more frightening possible reasons for the emergence of an infectious disease would be the deliberate spread of an infectious agent due to terrorist activity. Agents that are classified as the most dangerous potential bioterrorism agents include anthrax, botulism, plague, and smallpox. Organisms that cause infectious diseases have probably always been with us. And because new diseases continue to emerge, it appears that infectious diseases will be with us for some time to come. Because these agents mutate and become resistant to current drugs, we need to continue to monitor these agents and try to remain a step ahead of them in order to prevent the large losses of life that infectious diseases have caused in the past.